know me. My name's Deanna Smith, and I work for Idaho Smart Growth. I've been doing neighborhood work from my own neighborhood, which is the East End. Lived here for over 20 years now, and have been on the Neighborhood Association board since 1999. So I've done a lot of neighborhood work over the years, and I love how vibrant the neighborhoods are getting and the neighborhood associations are getting. It's very exciting to me to see them growing and growing stronger over these last some years. And then I've been at Idaho Smart Growth and working on transportation, walkable, bikeable issues since about 2010, so about 10 years. We're going to split a presentation today, and as best as we can, we want to include you and stop and ask you some questions, and we want to have time for Q&A. But on this platform, it might be a little wonky, so please pardon our struggles if things get a little slow. Just remember, you can always raise a hand over in the participant box or send us a chat question, and we'll try and call those out as we see those. We're going to do this very high level, so this won't go into a lot of real technical stuff, and that's really because part of what Cynthia and I are advocating here today is to enable neighborhoods to realize that there's a lot more they can do, and they don't need to be technical experts. What they need to do is feel emboldened to use and apply the neighborhood knowledge that you all have. You know your neighborhoods better than anybody. The people who live there are the ones who really know where people want to walk, where they can't walk, the challenges and the barriers in your own neighborhoods. So that's part of what we'll be trying to help you get just a sense of today. But if there's, because there isn't going to be a lot of technical, if you have a technical question or you want to dive deeper, please feel free to ask those questions. And if we can answer them, we will. So with that, Cynthia, I'll let you introduce yourself, and then I'll let you start the presentation.
Okay, thanks, Deanna. I'm Cynthia Gibson. I'm the Executive Director of the Idaho Walk Bike Alliance. And I've been doing that now about 8 years. And we focus predominantly on the state level. But interestingly enough, we got into traffic calming on a local level about 1.5 years ago through a grant with AARP, and we'll show you some of that project here today. And I worked with Deanna and Safe Routes to Schools and some other folks on that. And now with COVID, because I haven't been able to travel around the state, I've really been able to get involved in things locally. I live in the North End, and there's always a lot going on in our neighborhood, which makes it really fun. And I agree with Deanna, the neighborhood associations are becoming really engaged. And I think this is a really exciting time for neighborhood associations. There's obviously a lot going on in all of our neighborhoods. And so we're all starting to be concerned, which I think is great. We have to be aware of what's happening. So I am going to run the PowerPoint presentation today, Deanna, and you're going to handle the chat box. Is that right?
Correct.
Is that how we're kind of going to split this up? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get the PowerPoint up for us.
So just for everybody to know, a few of you don't have your mics muted. So even though I've enabled everybody to talk, I asked you to mute your mics except for when you have a question and we've asked you to ask it. And the other thing, since we're doing it this way, which is kind of the only way we could figure out how to do it, you're going to hear me tell Cynthia to forward the screen because I won't be able to do that. So
hopefully I'll do that. We'll see how it goes.
All right. So I'm going to you can go ahead and forward it now, Cynthia. I'm going to go ahead and do a real kind of high overview. And some of this may be really obvious to some of you, but I'm hoping to give you some new perspective on the land use side around walkability. We so often only think of the transportation and the infrastructure, and we don't think about what are we doing with our land use decisions, and how do our land use patterns serve or don't serve creating walkable places? And I was on a chat at noon with Jimmy and some others. A couple of you were on that as well. One of the people there brought up the notion that's really come out of Paris recently called a 15-minute city. Well, I think the real conversation is a 15-minute neighborhood. And so this is just one way in the smart growth world where we think about this connection between land use and transportation, which is really a lot of smart growth. A lot of smart growth is what is the intersection between land use, transportation, and community design and development? And is it driving what is driving, the future?
No.
These 5Ds is one of the ways I like to really think about this, and how they play with each other is really most important. So Cynthia, go ahead and, oh, that got cut off somehow. That's too bad. So it says destination. So one of the things I'd ask you to think about from your neighborhood perspective is, are there places you can walk to from your house? What are those places? And when you walk there, have you left your neighborhood, or maybe you have a small neighborhood? So kind of thinking back to the 15-minute, how long did it take you? Not very many people are willing to walk much further than about a quarter of a mile in our culture. That's beginning to change. But, mile and a half. No, don't go yet.
Sorry,
That's all right.
I'm just trying to figure this out.
Okay.
Um,
So anyway, so thinking about what you can walk to, what you can't walk to, and what you'd like to be able to walk to is really partly a land use decision. And the way I think about it is it's first a land use decision. Some neighborhoods have, frankly, newer neighborhoods might have some decent walkable infrastructure. So they may have decent micro trails, or they may have decent sidewalks. But if they have no place to walk to, is it really a walkable neighborhood? So if you can't walk to the park, or you can't walk to your friend's house, or you can't walk to a store or a restaurant or any kind of gathering place, then the question is, even with good infrastructure that you may have, if there's no place to walk to, it's really not walkable. So design is both. It's about how have you designed your land use, but also then how have you designed your infrastructure? And I think of design as one of those areas where it really overlaps a lot. Go ahead, Cynthia. Are you having a hard time forwarding it?
okay, there.
No,
So what is it that you see? I wonder if you're not seeing.
I'm seeing the street network and mode share choices. So
Me
you can
too.
kind of, Betty, are you trying to speak?
No.
Okay.
You don't see the design and distance slide?
Nope.
Well, I don't know, Deanna.
Maybe somebody can let me know what you can see. What are the participants seeing?
I see street network and mode share choices slide.
Yeah, so it's maybe you're frozen, Cynthia.
Nope.
Somebody's.
I see. Okay, I'm not sure. Forgive me for a second. I don't know.
Let me see if I can advance it.
Well, it's on my screen, Deanna. So
No, I can't do anything.
maybe I'll stop sharing. Let's see if you can get into it. Hold on a second. You want to try sharing your screen? See if you can get in.
Okay.
For some reason, it wasn't advancing on mine, but you all weren't seeing that, and I don't know why not.
Okay. I don't even have it up, so let me get it up. Sorry about this, folks. We did kind of do a little run through, but it never seems to quite get us there. We were on slide 5. So let's play that. No, share it first. All right, screen share. Share that. I need to get it into the. I think you need to go back to doing it, Cynthia, because I can now not figure out, remember how to get into slide mode.
Click on the play up top. Over to the left, Deanna. In the top, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we're back. Sorry about that. So this is another way to think about, a lot of this is now getting into your infrastructure in terms of the actual road design, but connectivity is a real part of this. Connectivity is what gives us distance or can make something further. So you can kind of see her on the left, you've got, you know, an area that's a little better connected. And I intentionally am trying to not use examples that don't, you know, the north end, the east end, we have a few neighborhoods, parts of the bench, you know, they're more gridded and they're tighter, but a lot of our community isn't. So it's better to really be honest and look broadly at what we have. So that's what I try to have here, to just show that, you know, within that space, now whether or not there's destinations, that's a whole nother question, but within that space, the way this is laid out and the way we've used the land is a little better connected. And so you're able to access more land. So then from the land use side, it's a matter of deciding.
Can you explain that, Deanna? Because that's just a graph right now to me. Why is the one on the left better than the one on the right? The right one looks more compact, easier to get around in that area. But you're saying the one on the left is easier. So can you explain that a little better?
Yeah, so the roads are connected. Instead of just having a few roads connected, and they're connected beyond that significant, that just that one neighborhood. So the one on the right, you're correct. If you just want to walk around your neighborhood, you probably can do that better, the one on the right. But if you want a walkable neighborhood, and what we mean by a walkable neighborhood isn't just for walking. You know, if all you're looking for is the opportunity to get out and walk your dog, and you know, that's different. But if you're looking for a walkable neighborhood, or the 15-minute neighborhood, which means you can use walking to get places, then you can't really get very many places from the neighborhood on the right. The places you can get internally inside your neighborhood, and even within your neighborhood, because so many of the streets are disconnected. If you lived on one of those very disconnected streets, and one of your kids' friends lived, you know, in the neighborhood, but on another disconnected street, you probably have to go really far out and around just for them to get to their friend's house. Does that help answer that question?
Yes, that did. That makes sense why North End seems like it's much more walkable to get places, whereas new subdivisions, you can't get out of them except for the one entrance.
Right. And you can see the one on the left, because it's not North End. They're not everywhere, not every street, not every place inside of Figure 4 has is as walkable. There's some dead ends there. There's streets there that, don't connect. Because it's a grid, making those connections, might be easier with redevelopment if the area is going to do that anytime in the near future. That's another thing that I'll talk about at the very end is kind of looking at your situation today and thinking about how to look at applications and projects as they come to your community and what you might want to be trying to influence along those lines. So this looks at the same thing in a little bit different way, and it might be easier to, connectivity is such a key to your place, where you live and where you're trying to get to. And again, this shows a gridded pattern, although even the one on the left where it's got the little dotted lines that take from the house to the school, that in fact wouldn't work without a micropath, as you can kind of see. You'd need a micropath through that area. So I don't necessarily think of these as in terms of the compactness, like you just said, and other things. You've got about, it's basically the same number of houses, pretty much the same density. So really all that's missing is connectivity in this instance. Everything else is there. And one of the things that increasingly people are starting to try and figure out is how do they take neighborhoods that are in a cul-de-sac environment, and they exist, we have them. So it's not like we're going to tear them all up and start all over. And there's some advantages to that, as we know. So I'm a real believer in those situations. If you live in one of those neighborhoods, to start looking for and thinking about how can you get micropaths. If you don't already have them, if it wasn't built with micropaths, which very few of them were, that's a very new thing that's just been happening maybe in the last 10 years here. But it doesn't mean that couldn't be a type of redevelopment. And in some ways, if you could take that subdivision on the right with the cul-de-sacs and really put a robust system of trails and pathways in there, you now actually might have an even more walkable neighborhood, and you might encourage walking even more. And I don't know if you can really see their little cut there, but up on the edge, so this is a true mixed use development. In addition to the school, you've also got a market and an office and a dentist. So while those may not be, lots of places to walk to, there's 4 different things that you can walk to, and that market might be a real gathering place. There may be a park internal here as well that you can walk to. So now I'm going to go into land use from a real different perspective, and that's the streets themselves. We have kind of forgotten that streets are land. It's a land use. Transportation is in fact a land use, and it's a land use decision that we've made. And I like to show this because it's not that long ago. You can even see in the picture on the left, we already have cars. And it's only really been in fairly recent times that we quit thinking of streets as a place that can be mixed use. So think about the way we think about trying to build our neighborhoods as mixed use. Streets should be a part of that conversation rather than being this single use for cars. And that's really kind of what we've done. And the reason we did it is a whole host of things, and there's a lot of history there, and some of you have lived through it. And it wasn't necessarily intentional, or frankly, a little bit of it was, but not all of it. But we really did stop viewing streets as places. And we even, frankly, in some ways, really stopped thinking of them as a land use. So when you think about your own neighborhood, you might want to stop and think about your streets and think about, how do you view them? Is it just how you get from place to place? Or is your street a place to really maybe go meet up with a friend? So the next little part of land use here, I'm going to dive deeper into some types of things that neighborhoods can consider along those lines. A lot of people don't realize that our streets are an average of about 80% in most cities of our public space. So by that, you think about all the parks and schools and anything, libraries, your city halls, anything that's a public space. The majority of that in any city is streets. So we have more public space in our streets than anywhere, which is one of the reasons the whole kind of street reclaiming movement has grown up, is a recognition that if we want to regain places and we want to regain connectivity, social connectivity, maybe we need to think about using our streets more actively. So I'm going to show a little video here just so you don't have to only listen to me talk, and Cynthia's got one too. Hopefully it'll play. But these are all pictures of pop-up street activation. And I tried to keep and show really simple things, because these are the types of ways streets, and by streets, I don't mean just the travel lane, although you can tell the one on the bottom is in part of the travel lane. It's in the parking area. The other parts of your streets is on the edges. Your sidewalk is a part of your street and other things. The one up in the top is actually not as much a street as it is a pop-up activity, but it could happen in a street. So this is a short, quick 2-minute video from our parking day. See if we can get there.
And then
Oops. Oh no, what did I do? Start that over. Oh no. Cynthia? Oh, there we go. All right. Sorry about everybody. I was trying to make it a whole screen.
and then also talking about really easy.
No video.
You guys can't see the video?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Well, we'll skip the video. If you want to see the video, I'll put it in the chat box and you can go watch it. It's on our website.
And I
And-
recommend everybody look at the video. That is a great little video, Deanna.
It's a fun video.
Mhm.
And we're now going to move into, I'm going to kind of leave the land use stuff, and Cynthia's going to start talking more specifically about the infrastructure. But before we do that, this is one of the events from that parking day that we have the video from. And I really like this photo. It's in the North End. They did a little parking day pop-up, and you can see they did a whole, they called it the front yard frenzy, and the whole neighborhood on this side of the block had a little party out on their street in their front yards. The only thing that was actually in the street was this trailer that they got and they set up as a little parklet. And they had all kinds, the kids played on it, people sat around, they used it in a lot of ways. And it was just a really fun way for them to explore the idea of reconnecting and putting activation on their streets. And so the last thought I want to leave you with about trying to think about using your streets more as another land use than just transportation is to also understand that activation or putting people on your street can be a really effective calming tool. If you have speeding problems, you have volume problems, if the only challenge you really have, or one of the key challenges you have, because we know this, we hear it all the time, that speeding is one of people's biggest frustrations. Whether you have a good sidewalk or you don't have a good sidewalk, speeding is a challenge. It doesn't feel comfortable and you don't want to be there. If you have a street where you can do this on, and not every street you can do this on, you're not going to do it alongside an arterial necessarily, although you could in the right location, to realize that the more you can get people out on your streets, and it's really one of the values of creating walkable communities, is it does slow people down. So Cynthia is going to take over now and move into talking about the traffic calming and street infrastructure side of this. Before we do that, does anybody want to comment or share anything or ask any questions? All right, we'll move on then.
Thanks, Deanna. So, as we talk about calming the streets and what it is that we're trying to do, I'm sure some of you have heard of the concept of Vision Zero, and Vision Zero is basically trying to get to zero road fatalities. And a big part of fatalities, not just people walking and biking, but motorists also, is going too fast. And so this chart shows that the rate of survival for a person who's out walking or biking and gets struck by a motor vehicle, their survival rate is going to be much greater if the car is going more slowly. So this is a big reason why we want to reduce motor vehicle speeds to improve safety for people, especially the vulnerable road users out on the streets. So next slide, Deanna. There's a lot of different types of improvements that you can do on the streets or ask for. You know, one thing that I find is that typically citizens and residents have a really good idea of what's possible and what can make a street safer. The engineers like to get in and give you a bunch of data and statistics. But oftentimes if it's your neighborhood and you know what you want, then you're oftentimes are pretty close to what's possible. So these are just some different examples of doing either a raised crosswalk. It keeps the pedestrian higher so that they're more visible to the motorist, and contrasting crosswalk. It's just creating it using a different substance or creating something with paint, just giving that different look to the road so that it alerts the motorist that there's a different type of activity up ahead. And then advanced yield striping. So this alerts the motorist to slow down because there's something happening in the road in front of them. So this is a great tool to get people driving to slow down. We see these in like roundabouts, or this is sort of an intricate crosswalk. I don't know where this is, Deanna. I don't know if this is here locally, but okay, just lets the motorist know something's coming and to slow down to look for a pedestrian.
Excuse me, I need to ask you a question. I don't see that on what you're talking about there of cross yield stripping. Where is it?
So it's the triangles that are painted on the road. We call those shark's teeth. Do you see those, Betty?
Yes, okay.
Yeah, so that lets the motorist know to slow down before they get to that point that something's coming up ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. And then curb extensions, we'll talk a little bit more about these, but curb extensions are becoming really, really popular. And we're seeing Ada County Highway District do them more frequently now. And they do two things. They narrow the width of the road so that slows cars down. And they also allow the pedestrian to walk out into further out into the road. So oftentimes they come out to the same area where a parked car is. So if you're a pedestrian and you're stopped at the sidewalk, there are no bulb outs. Sometimes you have to step out into the road to look around the parked cars to see if there's a car coming. And bulb outs put you out there. They also keep you high up so you have better visibility. These are a great tool that we're trying to get a lot more of in our county and in our state for a lot of reasons. We really like these. Okay, so, and then this picture I love. This is a curb extension with a bioswale. So we hear frequently from our highway district that drainage is a problem on our roads, especially in the areas where we have older roads. And so they have to deal with runoff and getting the water into the gutter. And bioswales, basically it's just dirt. And so the runoff can go into, oh, Nina's a big fan of bioswales, nice. So the runoff basically can just go into the ground. That's really, I don't know that it's any more complicated than that. I think it's, you know, basically you're watering, and then it cleans the water as the water goes down into basically into the Boise River. Mid-block crossings can be pretty contentious because the motorists might have to stop at the intersections also, but in places where it makes sense, where people are trying to get across the street, we use mid-block crossings just because the motorists need to slow down. Those are high visibility crosswalks with the pedestrian sign. So it's alerting the people driving that there's pedestrian activity right there. And there's other features on these. For example, it looks like there's some reflective in yellow on the picture in the upper right. And in the left, it looks like there's some brick, so it's just contrast. So that helps people who are visually impaired see the slope, and they can see the difference in the pavement versus the red. And it also alerts the motorists, so they see something different in the road, and it narrows it too. So those mid-block crossings are great. Anything you
So
want to add to those, Deanna?
Yeah, I just want to add, mid blocks to me are a real valuable part of a 15-minute city. So both of these are, you can kind of tell they're places that are inside neighborhoods. They're not like in a hard downtown core city downtown. They're, places you might walk to from your house. The one on the left, you can't really tell. The lower left is a school. It's an older school, and the one on the up obviously is a strip of shops, but inside a neighborhood. And so these are places, when you think about land use and destinations, these are places that you want them to be active. And mid-block crossings, in addition to curb extensions, can really help make them more active. You've made them more comfortable for the walker. You've invited them to be there. You've made it easier for them to get to. And they might, I don't know what's on the other side of the flower shop, on the other side of the street, but you may have like a Hyde Park where you've got activity on both sides, and people just want to be able to go back and forth. So I think mid-block crossings can be a really great addition to a nice activity place, a place where you have a lot of people moving.
So painting intersections, this is one of those great neighborhood projects that can bring your street together, or a couple of streets, and just using something like paint to create a design in an intersection slows the cars down. They're super curious about what's going on. And it's a great activity to just engage a bunch of people. Not super common in Boise. I would love to see more of these happening. I'm going to guess and say this is in Portland or Seattle, Deanna. I'm not sure where this picture. Yeah.
It's in Portland.
Okay. And wouldn't it be fun to see more of this happen, in our neighborhoods? So, okay.
I have a
So
question about this painting intersections. Is there a process to go through to get something like that to happen?
So I will tell
With the
you
city?
that in the cities that allow these and enable these, yes, they've developed a specific process. I'm most familiar with Portland's, but they're all kind of similar. And so I really like the approach Portland has taken for this, although they've fallen off a little bit. They're not done quite as much, because these really, as Cynthia said, these are as much about community connection as they are about anything. And so a community has to come together and plan what the design they want is, and they have to make a commitment to refreshing it every year. And then they just send they send the proposal to the city, and if the city says, sure, you can do it, and it looks like you can keep it up, then they go out and do it. And it's just a bunch of neighbors getting together, or other people, if they have artists they want to invite, or maybe it's the local high school that came up with the design. I mean, there's a lot of variety of ways to engage your community in doing these. It's a great way for neighbors to meet. So that's the program that got developed in Portland. The other cities that I know of that have them, they're a little bit different. We don't have a program like this right now. We'd need to do it with ACHD. The other thing is they also have to approve of the material. But I think it'd be fun, frankly, if the neighborhood associations wanted to get together, if enough of us wanted to do this and we wanted to get together to try and work with ACHD and the city to come up with a program that would let us do this. Cynthia,
okay.
do you want me to even try to show the video since the
You can,
last one didn't
Deanna,
work?
give it a shot. Let's see if it pops up.
Okay.
Doesn't sound like it. No.
That's a bummer.
Okay. Well,
Maybe I'll work on it and see if we can show it to people later.
let's go through the rest. Let's go through the Longfellow project, and
Yeah.
and then we can tie it into that other project. So,
Okay.
I hear the audio from the,
Yeah, I
from the
gotta-
video.
I gotta get rid of it. First, I have to
There's an airplane flying overhead.
pause my share. No, maybe here's, I think this is what I have to do. Let's see if you guys can see it now. Can people see it now?
I can't. All I can see is the painted intersection.
How about now?
There you go. Okay, so can you,
I'm gonna turn the sound off.
so we're going to only run this for about 3 minutes. It says 7 minutes, but we're just, yeah, there you go. So I'll just sort of talk through this as people are watching it. And so bear in mind, my husband is the videographer on this and he's not a videographer. And Deanna and I are the actors and we're just two people. So just take it for what it is. But we have been talking to the Southeast Neighborhood Association about doing some traffic calming. And so we asked them for a location and we wanted to do something very, very quickly and just put something out there and give this a shot and get some information while we did it. So we went out there on a Sunday afternoon with some really basic equipment. And this is equipment that anybody could find and or we have to loan out. So we've got some of the cones. We used a white paint that's like a chalk paint, so it doesn't stay permanently on the road. We brought a big blue pot. Deanna brought her flour and we put it in the middle of the street. We created a traffic circle in a location that this neighborhood association felt was a problem. And then we stood here and we talked to people and we collected information. And it was really useful. We learned that our traffic circle wasn't in the ideal location, but it did have the impact that it did slow cars down to a certain degree. So then Deanna went out with some more chalk paint and she just drew some arrows to guide cars, because what was happening when motorists came down from behind Deanna, they'd turn left and they'd cut the intersection and almost hit cars head on who were turning right. So she went out there, painted these, and then we stood back and we watched more cars come through the intersection to see what the results would be. And we were actually pretty surprised at how successfully this worked. And we're showing this to you just as something, you know, that you could try yourselves or you could work with us and we could come out and do that for you. But you're just trying to collect information and see what happens. So these two cars just came through here really slowly and really smoothly. So we felt like we had some success. And then, so I think then we just went out and we, in about 30 seconds, we took it down. The paint stays on, the chalk paint stays on the road for a little while, but it eventually wears off. And so then we went out, we just pulled it all down. So it's basically more or less gone, but it allowed us to do a lot of things. We had people walking through it, biking through it, people walking their dogs, and then motorists. And so in about an hour, we were able to get a really good feel for how a traffic circle would work there. The neighborhood association was out there with us. And so he collected some really good information too, and was able to work with us on this design. We did take it a step further and we designed some bulb outs and a chicane, you know, and had some fun and did some other things. You can stop the video here, Deanna, because now we're just sort of talking to Eric about, yeah, there you go. And then I think that Elizabeth, oh, okay, so she just put that into, thanks Elizabeth, into the chat. So these temporary traffic calming demonstrations, we're huge fans of these. And we also did another one, which I'm going to show you some information that we collected and some pictures of another one that we did over here in the North End. But they're a great way to try something out. They're not permanent. You can play around with it and you can just collect data. So let's see, Cindy, you have your hand raised.
Yes, if with this, could somebody like for a neighborhood party on the whatever that day of the month is that we do in the summer. Could somebody use chalk paint and paint intersections without having to get a permit? Because it's going to disappear anyway.
That's a really good question. We're big fans of guerrilla tactics, but I don't think we want to be talking about that.
Okay.
Deanna, what would you like to say in answer to that question?
Well, I think what is most important for this group to know is that in our efforts to improve walkability and this, of course, this segment is more focused on infrastructure because that tends to be where people start, is they just want a sidewalk or they just want to be able to cross more safely. Cynthia and I have increasingly discovered that we're big believers that these demonstration, and she's going to go through this, and they help on many levels. They help. They make it easier to just do, because they're part of why we wanted to show you that video is you could see how inexpensive that is. You know, if you can, with it's your choice to do it with or without permission, but with permission, you know, they're pretty easy to do. They're pretty low cost. And so we're working right now with ACHD to see if we can't get a policy and a procedure developed by them that would make it easier to just go out and do. That you could just fill out a little quick form that says, we want to do X, Y, and Z, and here's everything we're going to do with it. I find them to be an enormous educational tool, because in addition to how we grow and build our communities, a lot of the problem is also our behaviors, because our land use patterns and our infrastructure has built a culture of privilege over, the cars have privilege, consciously or unconsciously. When we're in our car, we have a real sense of privilege on the road. And that is a behavioral problem, because it means drivers have quit looking for other users. They quit watching for other users. That we've all quit thinking about other users. And that creates a real hazard. And getting back to that slide I showed of that one busy, messy road that had cars and people and all kinds of things going on. Back then, that didn't happen. You thought about everything and everyone on the street if you were moving through it, because you had to. It was culturally, it was just not, you know, cars were new. Something moving faster than a horse was new, you know, so it didn't occur to you that you had a sense of privilege as a car. So we find these demonstrations just, they educate all of us on our own behavior. They help us realize that they don't really slow us down, you know, maybe a second, you know, so it takes me a second longer to get to the store. Who cares? So Cynthia's going to show a little bit about a larger traffic calming demonstration that we did do with ACHD.
Okay, great. Thanks, Deanna. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So this particular project that we did was last fall, and it was a very short term project. You know, that's my one regret, is we should have done it longer, but because of the timing of the year and a few other factors, we just did a short one. But we decided that what we wanted to do was to put in temporary bulb outs in front of front of Longfellow Elementary on both 8th and 9th Streets. And the first thing that we really wanted to think about was, what is it that we're trying to accomplish? Because, you know, there's a lot of activity when those kids come into school. There's a school bus, there are parents dropping kids off, there's commuters trying to get through, there's bicyclists trying to get through the road. There's just all kinds of activity going on for about 15 or 20 minutes. And our goal was to demonstrate two things. One was to the motorists, that with traffic calming, it doesn't necessarily, like Deanna said, it's going to slow your commute down by a second or two, but not substantially. It's not going to increase congestion. And then demonstrate to the neighbors how the vehicular traffic could be slowed on their street. And then allow the Longfellow students and parents and everybody to understand what is a bulb out. Because we talk about these terms, we get a little wonky. People don't know oftentimes what a bulb out is and how they improve safety. So we wanted people to experience it.
By the way, real quick, just for terminology, bulb outs and curb extensions are the same thing. There's just two different terms people use to describe the same thing.
So we highway districts are very data driven. And so we decided that we needed to collect a lot of data. So one thing that we have been doing is collecting vehicle speeds on these streets. And we went ahead and we collected the speeds before the demo, and then we collected them during the demo. We also went door to door and got as many neighbors' signatures as possible saying they approved it. If we didn't get their signature or we weren't able to talk to them, we left some information behind for them so that they knew exactly what we were doing. We wanted to get feedback from as many people during the demonstration, so we created an online survey, and then we made sure to get videos and photos, and we talked to people and just collected kind of that qualitative information. And then another thing that really was a success for us was we invited the fire department and Valley Regional Transit, the school bus, other road users that you might not normally think about. We invited them to come down and drive around it and experience it and give us their feedback. We didn't want anybody to be surprised by this. We didn't want the bus driver on the morning of it to have to drive through there and see something in the road that he just wasn't comfortable with. So we made sure that we really reached out to many, many people beforehand and then during. Okay, Deanna. So these are what we use to create the ball balls. It's called straw wattles, and a couple things. They're pretty messy and they're not, they don't last very long. And ACHD came down and they brought a team of, I don't know, 15 or 20 people, and they basically glued these to the road to create the ball bouts. So the ball bouts that we created, I think many of them turned out exceptionally well. We just came off the curb and curved around, and it created this safe space for people. The problem was, because they were kind of glued to the road, they were really hard to get up, and that destroyed the wattles. So we couldn't reuse most of them. But the nice thing is they're round, so they work really well if you want to do like a traffic circle or something, because you can just bend them in any shape you want. And that's Deanna and Lisa Brady with Safe Routes to School. She also partnered with us. And then this is people walking to school. So you can see, this mom is just charging right ahead. She's not concerned about going out to where those cones sit in the road. And then the visibility was really good for the pedestrians and bicyclists and the kids going to school. And we also noticed motorist behavior really changed. We watched people turning their cars and driving from the side streets onto 8th and 9th, and it allowed the cars to go out further to also see around the park car. And this is something that we forget as walking and biking advocates. And the motorists, at first, I think they felt confusion, but I would say, Deanna, wouldn't you say by the second day, they knew exactly what they were doing. They were completely comfortable navigating around these, and it was not an issue after that. And then here's just another picture. This is the end of the day. This is people coming back through, and you can see what happens. The cars are coming through, but they are completely stopped for pedestrians. And there's this sense of almost community that happened in the street where people just said hello to each other. She's petting the dog's walking with that man. And it really changed the dynamic of a couple blocks in those intersections, because pedestrians were not running across the street. The kids do a really good job at Longfellow. They have a really good school crossing guard program. And we watched the kids with the ball bounce also. They would just step behind the cone and then they would step back out and help kids cross. So it just, it sort of organized the road users better, I would say. Okay, next slide. And then this is another section. You can see these huge trucks because of all the construction that's going on north of this neighborhood, coming through with a cyclist. Again, no issues, all of these concerns that people have when you put it down on the street and then you let people use it, they figure it out. And we just felt like everybody felt very comfortable using this. And I'll get to speeds in a minute. So go to the next slide, Deanna. We were really, really careful about signing our project. We still have these big signs and would be happy to loan them out to people. But we wanted to make sure that when motorists entered this traffic calming zone that we had created, they knew exactly what they were getting into. So they were alerted that something was coming ahead of them. And so they knew to look for other road users as they were driving through here. So like I said, we did a survey. We did a Survey Monkey, and we got that link out to as many people as we could. We wanted to gather as much information, and so I'm going to just quickly move through this. The bulk of the road users went through these intersections every single day. So these were frequent road users going through here. And the bulk of them were drivers too. Over 50% actually drove, which surprised me, but most of them were the residents or the parents who drove through this intersection. And then we asked about congestion, and because we wanted to know how people felt about this, and did they feel as though it increased congestion and traffic, and 3/4 of the road users said no, they did not feel as though it caused any increased congestion or traffic. And the bulk of the people, 8 out of 10, supported something more permanent. So we felt like the feedback that we had gotten was really positive. Another thing that we collected, and you can get this information from ACHD if you want, so they do count cars. The data that we got was a little bit murky. We couldn't get really good data on 8th Street, although we were able to find several years that they counted cars on 9th Street. And it is important information. And so I would recommend, if you're thinking about doing something, you do want to get this information, and you can do a public records request at Ada County Highway District, and they can provide this for you.
And just for those of you looking at this, ADT stands for average daily trips.
Thanks, Deanna. And then we really wanted to look at speed. So we have a radar gun, and we've been trained by a retired law enforcement person. I think that Sue's on this call also, and she was also trained. But so we are fairly consistent in how we collect speeds. We feel as though it's really important data. I have shown all of this information to Ada County Highway District, and even though they're not collecting the speeds, they still take into consideration this information that I share with them. And so what you can see is during the traffic calming condition, 96% are lawful drivers, which, you know, we're just asking people to follow the law, right? But what's happening is, under normal conditions, we have more speeding on our roads. So we did generate the impact that we wanted. It did slow cars down. Next one, Deanna. So, you know, in my conclusion, I would say that temporary is a way to go to just gather information. It also allows people to use the infrastructure and to, because like we said, you might not know what a bulb out is. You might not know what a traffic circle is. Most people don't. And you can then put it down on the road and people can try it out. And then you can get a lot of really good information collected about your street and your neighborhood moving forward. And we have, Deanna and I both have equipment. We have lots of cones, we have signs, we have equipment that we would loan out to people if they wanted to use it. That's all I have. I don't know if there are any questions, or Deanna's wants to go into your next section.
Yeah, well, why don't you've got the control of the question. So if anyone has their hand up or in the chat box, or anybody wants to unmute themselves, the one thing I would add to this, another thing that we both have concluded is this was up for a week, and I've done a couple of other temporary projects, and I really recommend if you want to do something this deep of a dive in your neighborhood versus the quick little thing we did over in Southeast, that you know, going through the whole permission process and really getting ACHD on board and agreeing to work with you to let you do this, do it at least for a month. What I've learned from these demonstrations is, for instance, in this instance, you might have expected that drivers initially reacted to it and were concerned about it, and it was a little uncomfortable. It's different, but if you give people enough time to use it, they get more familiar with it and more comfortable with it. And I think that the data results are better the longer it's on the ground, because, you know, to go through there 3 or 4 times a week in 1 week and then forget about it, I might decide maybe it's okay. But if I use it for a whole month and I really realize this isn't impacting me at all, or as a walker, this is really making things feel much better, it just gives people more time to kind of chew on it and really feel it. So that's just one more piece I'd add to the conclusion that we drew from this.
And I'll just say one more thing. We did see comments change on Nextdoor. We watched comments really carefully as they came in, and there was more negative comment in the beginning of the demonstration. But as we went through those few days, we saw the comments change. We saw people, and we saw people dialogue about it too. So there's a couple things in the chat. Cindy asked if I could share a copy of the presentation. I'd be happy to share a copy of the presentation so you can take a look at what we did for bulb outs and mid blocks. And I think for maybe the whole presentation, do we have people's emails so that we can share that out? I don't know if the city will provide that for us.
Yeah, I've got our emails at the end of this present PowerPoint. So maybe people, if you want to contact us, that would probably be I don't know if the city can share people's emails just because I don't know if they'd be comfortable with that. So that might be the better way to do it. So getting back to the very beginning part of this presentation and talking about the whole bigger picture of land use and transportation. I want to, a lot of you, the places, I was kind of excited to hear the neighborhoods and the neighbors that are attending, because many of you are in areas that are experiencing a lot of change. Some of it is redevelopment, but many of you out on the West, it's new development. But whether you're experiencing redevelopment or new development, one of the things neighborhood associations do is we look at all the applications coming through and what's coming. So I want to talk a little bit about assessing those and looking at those through a lens of, how can I impact making my neighborhood more walkable? So one of the obvious things is just looking at, okay, what are they proposing for connectivity? And here you have, I like this image just because you basically have, two very different versions of more or less the same development. And one is pretty poorly connected. It's somewhat connected, it's not awful. And another is even better connected. The one, they both go to a larger street that has a separated sidewalk. And one of the things that we're trying to push more and more is, the arterials in our communities, they're fast, they're high volumes and high speeds. And we have for too long, kind of conventionally, just if we put in a sidewalk at all, because for a while we didn't even do that. In more recent years, last 10, 15, we've been putting in pretty consistently, ACHD has been putting in sidewalks on all of them, but they're attached. And so people still don't use them very much because it's just not that comfortable. Maybe you got your own space, and it's sort of like painting a bike lane here. You have your own space, but does it really feel comfortable to be moving along next to these big, powerful things that are moving at 30, 40, 50 miles an hour? So that detached sidewalk is a really nice thing to see on the larger road down there, and the bike lane's better than nothing. But the top is really interesting because you've got a cul-de-sac. One is closer. You do have two more houses, so that's a development question. What does a developer need out of this, and can they afford to create the one on the right? Or is it really any better? Is the one on the left good enough? And these are questions you have to ask yourselves. You have to know what you want and what matters. The other thing on the left is, again, it's detached. So even though it's a local road and probably pretty low volumes and low speeds, do you want a detached path there? The main thing I would say that I like about it is I like separating bikes and peds as much as possible, because bikes and peds really don't mix much better than bikes and cars mix. It's maybe not quite as dangerous for a bike to hit someone who's walking in terms of the outcome, but it they are moving faster and they're moving differently. So I like the one on the, personally like the one on the right, because you've got a separate place for people walking. And at the same time, those sidewalks for a little kid who's learning how to ride a bike, or a family that's really moving really slow, they could also be on the sidewalk. And for someone like me, I can be in the street with the car, and it's narrow and I'm pretty comfortable. So that's one thing to look at when you're looking at applications. Are they thinking about this at all? And if they're thinking about it, is it what you want? And then, of course, the real big picture is that larger land use pattern. And, the real key to this, there on the call earlier, Nina had brought up that she really likes land use form-based code rather than Euclidean zoning. And I'm a huge advocate of form-based code, and that's a real wonky term. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, that's fine. But Euclidean zoning is what we currently have, which is, you've got a zone, and in that zone, certain things are allowed and other things aren't. Form-based code gets you more towards fitting things together in ways that make sense, and looking at form and function, and not being quite as concerned with whether it's an R2 or an R3 or an R1 or a commercial office. Or it's more about, okay, what do you want here, and how does it work? How can you make it work together? And I like this mixed use picture because I think it does that really well. It kind of shows what a nice mixed use development might look like. It has a variety of housing sizes and types, has other uses integrated or nearby, has decent connectivity. But the main thing that I would really urge all of you to, I know the city is working really diligently, and Deanna could speak to this if she wants to work with each neighborhood to develop a neighborhood plan. And I would encourage you, as you do that, when that opportunity comes your way, first of all, I would encourage you to do that and not just rely on the comprehensive plan, because it's much higher level. And then your neighborhood plan is where you can really dig down and plan for what you want, and plan for where you want density and where you want destinations and what type of destinations you want and how much you need. And then once you've figured all that out, then the infrastructure should feed that. It should respond to that and should not challenge it. It should support it. So it gives you a basis for really commenting on a plan like that. In lieu of a plan like that, you just need to think about your own neighborhood. And the reason I showed all the parklet stuff and the pop-up stuff is I know many of us live in pretty settled places that aren't going to change a lot. Maybe they're changing on the edges. Maybe there's some redevelopment going on. But if you're living in one of those neighborhoods where you don't see for the next 20 years any significant real change, but you wish you had more destinations, start thinking about where you could make those happen. Where could you have a little corner neighborhood gathering place that might have one of those little libraries that people are putting up everywhere? I see people putting up those libraries, but nothing else is going in with them. There isn't a bench. There isn't an umbrella or a covering. I'm a real advocate for looking at your bus stops, and I've tried a couple of years now, and one of these years it's going to stick. I keep trying to promote a project here that's called pop-up bus stops, where we take our bus stops. They're already places, and they're places that some number of people use because they wait there for a bus or they get off on the bus. And the idea of integrating a bus stop with a parklet place that provides more than just a bus stop. First of all, a lot of our bus stops are awful. They don't have any shelter. They don't have any place to sit. So even just the basics of a place to sit and hang out. And then, what more could you have there? Could you add a little table where people could sit and read? Or could you add a little table where people could play checkers? Or, and could people who are bus riders start integrating with the surrounding neighborhood? And, it's just a social connection point. So even if you can't be looking at new development coming your way, there's kind of like different neighborhoods. There's neighborhoods like Richards that are kind of dealing with an onslaught of growth. And really getting on top of a neighborhood plan that identifies that would be how I would recommend you really pursue going after the walkable and thinking about what does your 15-minute neighborhood look like, and really asking your neighbors what they want to walk to. I mean, maybe for some people it's just the park and they don't really care if they can walk to work. Maybe for some people they really want a Hyde Park like place where they can connect and gather. Most neighborhoods want a gathering place of some sort. Maybe it's your park. We have parks that aren't very easy to walk to, and how do you fix that? So that's really our last slide, and we're getting close to the end, but we wanted to have time for some just conversation and Q&A. This is our last slide. It has both of our email addresses there, so feel free to write those down and contact either one of us about anything now or in the future. But I just kind of want to leave everybody. Cynthia and I are working on this a lot, and we really want to work on it. And we are happy to come out and work with individual neighborhoods. I did a walk audit, for instance, with the Collister neighborhood about 2 years ago on Collister, because Collister has been a challenging street for them, and it's helped them move forward on working with ACHD. And so I think what we can help you with is get further along and get to a point where your interactions with ACHD are more productive. I know someone earlier on talked about you keep trying and you kind of feel like you're on a list, but you're waiting and waiting and waiting. And we're also working to push them. We're happy to work with you. There's a ton of walk audit tools out there, and sometimes I know people go look at them and they start feeling overwhelmed. And I'm one of those people who really likes to start with the real simple. You're not the technician, but you are the expert. And to me, the expert can answer questions like, is it comfortable? Is it not comfortable? If it's not comfortable, what makes it not comfortable? What would help make it comfortable? And where are you trying to get to? Those are the questions you first want to ask and answer, because until you've asked and answered those, then you can go on to the technical side. And people like Cynthia and I, there's other people out there who can help you with this. There's more and more around who are learning how to do this stuff. But we're both available, and I personally love doing walking tours and walk audits with neighborhoods. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and just open it up and invite people to
I want to say something really fast, Deanna. First of all, my email address is just cynthia@idahowalkbike.org.
Oh,
So
sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
Your old one in.
Yeah, don't even worry about it. It's kind of like if somebody asked me my husband's phone number, I would never know it, right? Like we don't even think about those things. So cynthia@idahowalkbike.org.
Okay.
And then the other thing I wanted to say, Emily, I don't know if you're on this call, Emily Jackson Edney, who's running for Ada County Highway District Commissioner, but she mentioned the 13th Street traffic calming project that's coming soon. There she is. And I don't know, Emily, do you want to talk about that project at all, or just?
Maybe a little bit.
Okay.
It's it'll go from, I believe, 4th Street to all the way past Camel's Back Park, actually, eventually. If you've been in Hyde Park, the 2 blocks that are in Hyde Park was done quite a few years ago, but it used traffic calming in there. It used an intersection at Eastman that has a lot of different character in it. It used bulb outs. It used landscaping, a separation with boulevard strips. And so it's kind of a good example of what's going to be happening up and down 13th Street. And I believe there's going to be some sort of a mid-block crossing right at North Junior High School too. So I don't know all the details. I'd have to probably take a look at the budget for this year on the timing or the fiscal year work program, but it's coming, and it's going to be just a really nice place, actually.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm glad you joined us today.
And I I saw we had a few more people join while we were in presentation mode, and I've now allowed you to talk. So if you couldn't talk before, you should be able to now. Any questions or comments, particular challenges people are having that we didn't address at all and you want to bring it up and see if we can help you today?
I would mention something, and it's kind of I think, a good reason to do this incremental approach of temporary, maybe traffic calming devices. For us, what we now call Old Hill Road, of course, wasn't always Old Hill Road. And literally, we had a kind of generational attempts to, do something to stop kind of the crazy traffic and speeding on it. And it wasn't until Karen Danley finally moved to our neighborhood that we finally got it done. But it was really tough. It literally took, 20 some years. And now, because we have some speed humps, and they're not perfect, but there's something installed that did let us kind of get to that, it gave us a little soil to work with, if you will. And now a lot of people are walking, and we kind of have taken back this road. And it's an easier road than some because it should no longer, there's other places to drive now on the parkway, et cetera. But it now, because of brave souls and then just kind of the use, like you say, people are using it enough walking in the middle of the road, which I love to see. And we really have changed it. What we still occasionally have is the just crazy, fast, reckless driver who's got good suspensions and will just enjoy flying over those speed humps and up and down over the hills, blind hills, mind you. So that remains a challenge, is that, it's only 1% or 5% or, but it's still a real danger. But in general, I just want to put a shout out. Yeah, I think that incremental approach, if we had been able to do that, we might have moved forward a lot faster, because we might have kind of gotten to people starting to say, look, yeah, we can walk on this. And then we might have saved 20 years. I don't know, but I like the idea. So that's all. Thanks.
Thanks, Richard. So I see a couple people are unmuted. I don't know if that's because you want to speak. I see Gypsy and Elizabeth both have their mics off.
Well, I'm Gypsy, and I just appreciate what you are looking into in terms of making areas more walkable. As I'm entering my senior years, I have a lot more confidence walking in an area where there are some of those bump outs and things like that to slow the traffic down and make people more aware. And I think I see a lot of folks who are older than I am are really struggling with that. And then what happens is they stop walking, and they start depending on someone to take them door to door. So, and then of course, they lose touch with their neighborhood. And right now, especially when we're dealing with COVID, just to be able to walk down the street and wave hello to someone who's walking across the street is, very reassuring to people and makes them more a part of the community. So I appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, well, I appreciate those comments, Gypsy. I've done a lot of presentations on why, so that today wasn't really about that, including at the previous Boise neighborhood interactives. But, why you want a walkable neighborhood, you just cited two really important reasons. And one is there are people who don't drive. And as people age, we tend to force people to stay in their cars longer and drive beyond maybe when they should be driving. And it's because if you don't live in a 15-minute neighborhood, then it's how you have to get to things if it's not comfortable, as you pointed out. And then it makes youth less independent and able to get there. Moms and dads have to jump in their cars and get them places. And then the other reason is, having a neighborhood you can walk around is one of the best ways to create neighborhood and create community. People, you see people. I feel very fortunate because I live in a very walkable neighborhood. In fact, I live in a neighborhood that people drive to walk around in. So anybody else? Comments or questions? it's a big, big topic and we barely touched on it. We could dive into far more technical with anybody who wants to. We were trying to do the high level to open it up and help people realize you can have a voice in this, because all of our voices really matter.
I'd just like to add, Deanna, that I just want to tell this group, we appreciate your time today. Thanks for listening to us. And we are taking this incredibly seriously, and we are working really hard, trying to partner with Ada County Highway District and trying to get more of these temporary demonstrations. So please, if it's something you're interested in, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We really want to see our neighborhoods become better neighborhoods. We want to see more of that community that we're talking about. And this is one way that we can all do it. And it's a pretty easy way to see things change long-term. So I hope that everybody here will think of us as a potential resource to help you accomplish that.
I know we're over time, so I realize if you need to go or want to go, feel free. But I just want to throw one thing out there, because I'm a real advocate for this. We have a lot of rural areas that are developed and developing that still have very rural road cross sections, meaning they don't have any curb and gutter. And I'm a real advocate, and I've sat through a lot of hearings at both ACHD and the city where people don't want sidewalks, they don't want curb and gutter, they don't want to change that form and that feel. And I'm a personal believer that we don't have to. We don't need curb and gutter and sidewalks to create walkable communities. There are other techniques, not that that's a bad technique, but I just want to reach out to those of you who live in one of those neighborhoods and you're feeling like you're being forced to put in curb, gutter, and sidewalk. I'd love to talk to you about other possible strategies. I know it's the city's main focus, but I'm also constantly in debate with them about why it shouldn't always have to be the only. I just don't think there's only one solution to every problem, and retaining rural cross sections in some places might be the right approach. So with that, I'll leave you with that little bit to chew on, I guess. And unless anybody has something else, Cynthia, thank everybody for coming along with you, and have a rest of a good time at whatever other sessions you go to. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good evening.